So let me start off officially and welcome you all to our session. And we've changed the title because, the times require that we are flexible and we adjust to what's going on. And so our title now is Justice Redefined, meaning the moment of today. And we landed there because justice work is nothing new. And we know that we have a calling to advocate for communities across all different spectrum, and our role here as educators is really to figure out how do we continue this work when the world around us is telling us that it is not valued, right? And so for us, we want to take on our approach, our perspective of how do we how do we redefine it and reclaim this term and not let it be on the little list of things we can't say. And how do we meet the moment of today? So I have to do this official thing because of our podcast, and then we're going to jump right in. So welcome to the Voices for Justice podcast, which is part of the Higher Endeavors Network's Equity and Racial Justice Learning Track. This podcast seeks to enhance equity-mindedness through conversations addressing critical topics and highlighting asset-based narratives from practitioners in the field. I'm your host, Nia Woods Haydel, and today we have a special episode for you, recording live from the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in Higher Education, NCORE, in New York City. We will have the opportunity to hear from two phenomenal guests, Ed Smith-Lewis, Senior Vice President for Strategic Partnerships and Institutional Programs at UNCF, and Ida Hermosillo, Director of Network Engagement at Growing Inland Achievement. We're going to discuss how they are navigating the current environment to continue advocating for the communities their missions commits them to serve while maintaining self-care throughout it all. So I am not going to read bios. You can Google them. There's lots of great stuff out there. They're fabulous. But what I want you to know is the reason why they're up here is because they have demonstrated over the course of their career a commitment to fighting for justice. They advocate and lift the voices of people who are often unseen and unrecognized. And when I was thinking about who do we want to be able to help us think through and lead us in some conversations around what could this look like today, and how could we navigate these, I'm gonna call them treacherous, because sometimes they feel treacherous times, and really, do what we are called to do and be okay on the other side. So that's why Ed and Ida are here, and we're just planning to have a really great conversation. So I'm gonna start off and ask both of them to just talk a little bit about your journeys. How did you land here doing this work that you are engaged in today?
Nia, thank you for having us. And excuse my voice today. I'm practicing Barry White, and this is just what you're going to get today. But my work at the United Negro College Fund and my journey, I would say, is deeply personal, but also deeply institutional. I work at UNCF not just for what it does, but what it represents. And that's really an opportunity for all learners to achieve their greatest aspirations. For me, justice is not just charity. Quite frankly, it's not even equity in the way that we've traditionally framed it. It's infrastructure. It's how do we scaffold opportunities for people who may not have them. I'm a first generation high school graduate. And I wouldn't be here on this podcast today if it were not for institutions, people who extended a hand, programs that showed me something that I may not have known, opportunities that were there not because I paid for them or that my family bequeathed them to me, but because they were deserving. I was deserving of it. And for a long time, I used to think I was deserving because I was a good student. I excelled in math. I loved to take a test. But the reality was everyone is deserving. And the question becomes, how do we build infrastructure that allows all of us to do that, to live our true lives? And for me, that's justice. For me, justice is not a moment. You say treacherous times, and I say I agree, but we've been here before. Mm-hmm. in some ways it's been worse. I grew up on the West Coast and had an opportunity to go to the school in the South. And I have to tell you, I've never seen more overt racism in my life in the South. But I also have to say I've never seen greater hospitality. I haven't seen more welcoming environments, more love, more support than I've seen there. And sometimes it's better to see the enemy than for them to hide behind closed doors. And so this moment for me just illuminates what we all need to understand, is that the sort of fight for justice for all is one that we must continue to endure. The work that we do is not easy at the end of the day, but it's definitely necessary. And when I think about sort of why I do what I do, I know that there are many other sort of Ed Smith Lewises out there who have big dreams, big hopes, big aspirations, but maybe just born in the wrong zip code. And how do we help them find their path, whatever path that may be? For me, that's justice. So let's not think about justice as a term. Let's think about it as systems, processes, approaches, the scaffolding we need to ensure that everyone realizes their dreams.
Thank you. My name is, you guys heard earlier, Ida Hermosillo, and I'm so excited and honored to be here with you here today. I don't think there's probably anyone in the room that doesn't have some kind of personal passion or journey attached to why they're here, right? And for me, it's not any different. For me, it was a student that shaped my path, but more importantly, that student was my son. And so in his senior year, he became visually impaired due to a born condition. And I was always an advocate in my community. I was always standing up for justice one way or the other. It's just kind of who I was. What I never imagined is why I was like that and how life was preparing me for what was to come. And so in trying to learn to advocate for my son's disability, again, reminding you it happened in his senior year, I was taken back by the amount of barriers that students face. And when we talk about equity, when we talk about justice, we talk about DEI work, you know, some folks, probably no one in this room, you know, identify certain people in these little clusters. And sometimes we tend to think that because there is a program, whether it's TRIO, a disability center, they're okay, right? There's resources for them. There's somewhere to go. They just need to go. But what I learned in my journey is that when you're facing that as a parent, as a family member, as a community member, and even more so as the individual, the student, you become paralyzed. And it's not about the library having 10,000 books of resources. It's about how do I walk myself to the library, open the door, and figure out what book to read, right? And so for my son, he was very blessed that, I was able to dedicate myself and our family to helping him navigate this. But most of the students we serve can't do that.
That's right.
Can't leave a career to learn to advocate for their child, to ensure that they have access, to ensure that they graduate from high school successfully and get to college. And so, and that's exactly what, as a family, I decided to do. I had to educate myself on disability law. I had to educate myself on IEP plans for students. And I stood in front of principals and vice principals and said, you will see me today, and we will get this done because my son graduates this year, and there's no other option. What I did learn, and he learned, is that, just because there's something that says you have to accommodate someone, they don't have to do it, which is just, blows my mind, right? And so it was learning the law, learning what resources were available, how to access them, and all at the same time teaching a child whose life as he knew it crumbled. From being a star football player to going, admitted into multiple four-year universities, to all of a sudden all that going away and being in a surgery room back to back for 6 surgeries, right? And still not recovering vision. And so he graduated with great grades. He went on to community college, We decided to keep him close by. He finished community college, went on to finish his bachelor's degree, and then is already finished with his master's and working in higher education, advocating for the same students that we advocate for. Thank you, thank you. And what I want to leave you with is that it doesn't matter what programs are built. It doesn't matter what resources are available. We are the hand that helps them walk there. We are the voice that helps them hear what's available. And we are their advocates in every space we serve, because I promise you, it doesn't matter how much they want it, life as they learned it, life as they know it, and the barriers that they're facing paralyze them. And it's not something they choose, it's something that just happens emotional, physically, and psychologically. And so that helps me always remind myself that my voice needs to be there. My ears need to be there, my feet need to be stomped on that ground, and always advocate through that lens for all our students to have equal access. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. So, okay, can you all hear me? No. Okay, so we're on question number 1, and I'm already going to deviate. Because what you're saying is very powerful. So, and this was navigating the structures that existed, the things, the resources that we have. So how are you now approaching this work and redefining justice, as you have explained here, when systems around and structures are being dismantled in the space? So what does that look like now?
At UNCF, it means continuing to do what we've been doing. When you think about what justice means, who fights for justice, who's on what side of a ever-increasingly polarizing state, HBCUs have always sort of sat at the margin. They've been institutions that were founded for less than humans, taken years to be fully valued. Some would say we're still struggling to be fully valued in higher education today. And so when you think about justice for the set of institutions that I advocate for, it's no big difference. I mean, same thing today as it was 10 years ago, as it was 20 years ago, as it was in 1837 with the founding of the first one. That it's about staying focused on what the end goal is. It's hard for us to get into what new initiative is going to drive better outcomes and increase equity when the reality is the system is struggling. And so we have to focus on the places and spaces where the students we say we care the most about are, and do the hard work of improving how they operate. And that means for us leaning into data. Oftentimes data can be used against you. But you have to think of data as both a sword and a shield. When we talk about outcomes and we talk about justice, we focus on economic impact. We focus on social mobility. We focus on disproportionate outcomes. And then we make justice so undeniable that you can call it what you want, but we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. And so what I say to practitioners in spaces where maybe DEI is a moment, how do you focus on the beliefs, the policies, the structures of your institution, the mindset of the people on your campus, and less on what public opinion may say? Every word is polarizing this day: equity, race, gender, black, gay, it's like, it's a struggle. So focus less on how we articulate it and focus on who you're doing the work with. Because at the end of the day, to make this moment a movement, it's going to be about like galvanizing people who believe in the same outcomes that you believe in. And so how do you get people to understand what's at core, your principles, what your beliefs are fundamentally? And if you play there, I think you find that most of the terms are politicized in a way to get us not focused. But if you focus on what's the core, you focus on your core beliefs, And you move with an understanding that not everything's going to be perfect. One thing I've learned looking at HBCU history is the pendulum always swings. Mm-hmm. And for the last 2 decades, for most of my adult working life, the pendulum has been swinging in a way that I've been incredibly amazed by. Like, we've made tremendous progress as a nation to understand individuals, to understand systemic barriers and challenges, to understand what's possible when we lean into the problem. And so, yeah, we're going to push back a little bit. There's a couple steps back, but that doesn't mean stop. And for me, it's about focusing on what's core to what you believe. And if you're a person that only believed it because it came with a DEI title, then maybe you have some soul searching to do to understand that the work is more than the words. It's the actions. It's the students that we're talking about. And as I said, it's the infrastructure. Like, what policies, practices, programs, systems, sense of belonging are you providing to your students, to your faculty, to your staff, and to the community outside of your walls? If you're looking broadly at uplifting all, then you can't help but uplift those at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And yes, they may not want you to articulate it directly, but if you're doing the work that engages those individuals, that believes in them, and sets them up with opportunities to succeed, then you're doing justice work. Who cares what they call it?
You know, when I think of justice, what I do know is that it cannot be a trend, right? As equity can't be a trend. It needs to be intentional, and it needs to be a tradition. And the reason I say tradition is because we all value traditions, right? And if we look back in history, a lot of people with a lot of wisdom did the same work. And I think, you know, we need to lean into that sometimes to not only stay focused and intentional, but to also learn, right, from history. And how do we keep this work forward? I also believe that it's, you know, justice has to be about access, and not just like, is it fair, right? But equal access and opportunity for all students. And we have to realize that our systems just weren't built for, you know, student facing. It was built for institutional success, right? And so as we're doing this work, is, you know, like I said, like, how do we always bring the student to the core? And it doesn't matter how we articulate it, call it what you may, but what we're all working towards is that access to all students, not some students, all students, and with the same measure, right? It's like, not you have some access to this, you might not have access to that. And those are systems that are going to require not only transformation, but redesigning from the core. And so when we look and we're in these spaces of like, why is this outcome not where it needs to be? Why is that metric off? Well, we can't just say, well, it might be branding, it might be out. No, like, what does the system look like, and how does it, or how does it not support the outcomes we're trying to achieve? And be courageous and unapologetic in saying, well, it's because it wasn't designed with that intention. So how do we then redesign that? And I think, you know, I don't know, some of you may, I think most of us maybe back in the early 90s, late 80s, but I always say equity can't be done as a poser. Anyone know what a poser is? Yeah. Well, I was never the poser. So it's got to come from within. It's got to be intentional. And when you know, I always tell people, it's like, okay, well, you can't say the word, you can't say you do this work. What about, what brings you here every single day? Why do you do the work you do? You know, and they'll come up like economic mobility, social, you know, whatever, student success. Great. Well, let's do that for everybody. And how are we going to do that, right? And then with data, it's like, you know, we talk to our leaders, and it's always about, what does the data say? Well, then let's use it. Let's make sure our data tells the right story, and disaggregate every piece of data that you have access to tell the right story. Because if you do that, it's going to show itself where the gaps are, And then what are the intentions and what are the needs in that institution or organization that need to occur to create equitable data outcomes that tell the story for all our students.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I really appreciate that because sometimes we're fearful that if we can't say the word, then we're like softening the work. I did a lot of sort of equity mindedness work. One of the first things it says, you got to be explicit about who you're serving. Ooh, hard to be explicit today. Like they don't want to tell. We can't say the exact words. But to Ida's point, don't disaggregate the data because I think you can't do that either. It's a problem. But you can mine the data.
Yeah.
You can't understand what the data are saying, where are their externalities, where are people moving beyond the core, right? Where's this third standard deviation away from the outcomes, right? It's not about disaggregating the data for race and ethnicity. It's about mining the data for the abnormalities. Because if you focus on what's abnormal in the data, you're traditionally gonna find those that are left out. So use math. Like, use the math. Like, so many of us focus on, disaggregate the data, but we actually can't do it. No, learn to mine the data. Now, iPads still exist, last time I checked. But I, Senior Vice President, I'm gonna go pull down the data myself. I'm gonna mine the data in the evening. There was a story out in the New York Times about the black male achievement gap and college going rates. So what did I do? I went to iPads and I put the last 10 years data and I saw, well, where are the sort of abnormalities? Turns out the only set of institutions that have seen an increase in black male enrollment in the last 10 years are private liberal arts colleges. Interesting. But they're talking about, there are no black males in HBCUs. Yeah, because private liberal arts colleges also have seen the biggest growth in endowments, which means they're likely paying for these low-income, largely first-generation students to go to college, so they're the ones that are seeing enrollment increases.
Right.
But the community colleges are seeing huge tanks. Why? Because there's an attack on the value of higher education. And people are getting pushed out of cities where community colleges are, so they actually don't have access to the same community colleges. You know the community college with the largest drop in enrollment in the last 10 years? City Colleges of San Francisco. San Francisco City College. Why? Because who poor can live in San Francisco, right? So go mine the data. And don't treat that you can't say these words as softening it. No, sword and shield. Go work harder. Go look at the data. Fight the battle with an understanding, a nuanced understanding of what the data are saying. Because the data will lead you to the right questions, and the right questions, no matter how much people try to deny it, will ultimately lead to the right answers.
Okay, so there's a whole lot there that I want to pull in. So just to highlight, one is that what I heard around being courageous in leadership. So it is going to require that we have difficult conversations, that we ask people difficult questions, that we hold people to task, right? In the sense that when these conversations come up and we're trying to figure out why certain students are not there, we need to call it what it is, not focusing on the lexicon, but really asking some questions and being willing to take the risk in doing that, right? And then when we talk about the data, so you're right, Ed, that we can't say disaggregate anymore, but we can figure out how to get the data. And so it's the same concept, but being strategic. We have to think differently. So we have to really, there's a James Baldwin quote that now I can't remember, I will by the end of the time, where just that talks about the fact that we're being out-strategized when it comes to this. And so how do we really rethink this and not by ourselves? So Ed, I'm gonna tap you later on some of your strategies. But just the way that Ed went through the process of figuring out, okay, I can't do this. So what are my other options? And I think sometimes because there's so much coming at us that it's easy to get frozen. But what we are called to do at this time is to rely on our communities in order to be able to figure out the best way to do this work, right? So we've talked about data, we've talked about what this looks like today. let's talk a little bit about that sense of belonging, because in cultivating these environments where students feel as though we still are focused on them, because as whether we're an academic or a professional practitioner, we've been doing this for a while, more years than I want to say out loud, but we've been at this. So it can be easier for us to be able to understand that just because we change the process or the strategy doesn't mean we're diluting the value that we see. But I don't know that students feel that all the time. So when we're talking about this work, how do we still create these environments and cultivate a sense of belonging for the communities, which on paper, when things are coming down, like offices are being shuttered, it could feel as though we were never really committed in the first place.
I was going to steal your answer. That's why I was like, go ahead, Ida.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking for the mic.
No. At the end of the day, I started this talking about infrastructure, but infrastructure is so cold. It's like, where's the human aspect to this, the relational piece? And when it comes to the critical nature of sense of belonging, all of the things that we're talking about, the polarization of words, the challenges and policies, they don't matter. Because at the end of the day, sense of belonging is about culture building. Mm-hmm. You have to build a culture that sees every person, every learner, every partner, every thought leader as human. And humans come with their own sets of baggage, their own beliefs, their own limitations, and you must meet them where they are. So regardless of what's happening in the public domain right now, what happens when that one person meets that other person? What's that level of engagement that says, I see you, I hear you, and I believe in you? That sense of belonging. And so when I think about like what does it take in this moment, it takes us unpacking our own biases, which is personal, our own beliefs, which are personal, and our own fear, which are deeply personal, and then engaging with people. Knowing that 9 times out of 10, the reason they're in front of you is because they're hoping for something better, and they probably don't have the pathway to get there. So what do? You lend a hand. You lean into community. You guys heard the African proverb. I don't have to repeat it. But the reality is community is what's going to get people who don't have the scaffolding they need to get to the place they want to go. And if your community is only what you know from birth, then most of us will be stuck. But if we can find a way to get people just to see a little more than they did before they met you, you've done your job. Like, you've done your job. It's hard to force any one person to do exactly what you believe. Believe me, I've been trying with my nephew and my niece and my husband and my sister and my little brother, with my institutions, my team. No one wants to listen. But as long as you push them a little further than where they've been before, that sense of belonging, right? I can go back in my life and I can tell you whether it was Geraldine Drew, Dorothy Scott, Eileen Moffitt, John Faggi, right? I can name all of these people who pushed me a little further. And then I look back on it and I say, woo, that's a crazy road that I've traveled. And I could have never imagined it before each of them did their own little piece. And there's not one person that deserves all of the credit. But collectively, they got me to a place I could have never imagined. Mm-hmm. That sense of belonging, and that has nothing to do with data, has nothing to do with policy, has to do with seeing people for who they are and giving just a little of yourself to make their path just a bit easier.
And to add to that, I'd like to set the tone with saying, like, and those that work close with me know I say this often, is you can't give what you don't have. And so a lot of us here today represent mainly institutions, maybe some organizations. What do your people serving these students feel like? What is their sense of belonging? You know, I go on a campus and I see some places that everyone feels good. And you walk into a department and they're happy and they're, connected and they understand what that transformation process looks like that their institution's involved with. And they want to be part of it. But then you go to some campuses and, that doesn't look so great. And so I always say, we got to look inward first. And as leaders that we are and partners that we are in these ecosystems across many campuses and departments, is how do we create it with those in those ecosystems as well? Because if not, they are not going to give it to our students, right? They're going to be the posers. They're going to do, a little fair that has, something around Black students, maybe some equity stuff, maybe some LGBTQ booths, etc. But it doesn't end there. What if the student missed that day and wasn't able to go to that fair? How are they going to create a sense of belonging? And I hear that all the time. Oh, we do this. Okay. Where's the sense of belonging in the classroom? Where's the sense of belonging when they walk on campus? What does that feel like? And so we, always look at what is a student's journey from the moment they step on campus and even walking through a campus, sitting in a cafeteria. Because when you talk to a student, and I know all of us feel the value and know the value of student voice and experiences in this work, most of those conversations lead to Ed's point on that one person who just pushed me a little bit extra, that one person who actually asked me, how are you doing today? Right? Because they're humans too. They're just looking for that. We were made to be connected to other people. And so, it isn't this big theory of action like plan or strategic plan that made the student feel the sense of belonging. It was the human affection, the human contact, the human engagement. And most of the time when I talk to students, it comes down to just, you know what? I don't think I've ever talked to a professor. And it's kind of nice when a professor just says hi. Or I'm in the hallway and someone says, how are you doing today? And I know that sounds simple, but not all the answers are complex.
That's right.
Right? Sometimes we need, I talked earlier about tradition. Today in the elevator, I'm like, 5 people jumped in my elevator. Nobody said good morning. I was the only one saying good morning. And I'm like, what's going on here, people? Anyhow, so the point is that, yes, there's a lot of things we work on that are complex. We all probably have a theory of change. We all have a strategic plan that we probably created this year. It seems like everyone's in the strategic plan phase. But nevertheless, we need that to be our guiding principles, to stay focused, intentional, right? And connected. But at the end of the day, is also put on that lens is like, how are our partners, our institutions, these ecosystems and transformation processes we're building, also at the core, building those spaces to have human contact, empathy, connections, and conversations that build not only sense of belonging for those we serve, but those there to serve those students.
And I work with Complete College America, and as part of this project, we are visiting a number of campuses. So we've visited, I think, almost 80 at this point. And at the beginning of our day-long visit, we asked this question for everyone in the room to think about a time in their lives in higher education college where someone made them feel as though they mattered. And we do that. It takes a lot of time, always throws our schedule off kilter because nobody can only list one person. It's a mess. But it is actually the best experience that we have in the whole day, because it does a lot of different things. One is it causes people to really take a moment to reflect, to Ed's point, on all the people who have been significant and made them feel as though if they weren't there, they would have missed them. It's interesting that at every campus, there's at least one person who can't think of a single person that made them feel as though they mattered while they were in their higher education experience. and you have a lot of people who relied on family and friends because there was no one in faculty and administration. And the question that we always ask them is to take that experience, whether it was someone that they knew or no one there, and think about the fact that they could be that person for someone on the campus. And maybe someone is walking around with no one. The other thing that it does that's really dynamic is that a number of the people, although some of them have worked together for 5, 10, 15 years, don't know anybody's story. And it creates a space where they are able to have a better understanding of the journey that brought people to where they are today and why they do this work. So that person in IR who you think is only focused on the numbers has a story around how somebody made them, helped them to figure out that they should be in IR. And it humanizes us in beyond our roles and titles. And I think that's, if you haven't done it with your staff, your team, your division, I would encourage you to do that, because it seems to recenter people and then helps us to think about, how do you, somebody did that for me, and am I doing that for someone else?
That's right.
Right? So we have about 5 minutes or so, and we wanted to give an opportunity for anybody in the audience, if you have a question, to ask us a question. Does anybody, you have a question? And just so you know, we're recording your questions, so that when we do the podcast, I want to officially say this, your voice is going to be on the podcast.
That's fine, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Shamar Degan. I'm a recent graduate of St. Paul College in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I just got my associates in arts, so I'll be heading to the University of Minnesota in the fall to finish my bachelor's. Thank you. So my major is in anthropology, so this is kind of, I guess you could say, like almost like an anthropological question. So you guys talked about, especially you two, you guys really talked about building culture, right, and building that sense of belonging, in spite of the fact of the polarization of some of these words or some of these concepts. But language is a really big part of culture. So do you not feel like we should take a stand when it comes to some of these words and concepts, not allowing that to stop us from doing the work, but taking a stand and saying, hey, okay, no matter what you say about it, we're going to continue to use these words and these concepts to build the culture that we want to build, in spite of what you're doing?
I love that question. At the end of the day, you got to decide what battle is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So for some people, yes, it's like critically important. Communication is the root of all culture. I agree 100%. But that, unfortunately, is not my battle. And if I wanted to battle that, I would be in a different profession, quite frankly. My ultimate aim is that more students graduate from college. And so if fighting a battle on word choice will get more students to graduate from college, I'm all in. Like, let's do it.
Yeah.
But right now, I know sense of belonging, clear pathway, wraparound supports,
Yeah.
like clarity on where they are along their path is much more important than whether or not I could say black or whether or not I could say justice or equity, or because right now that student is in need of help today. And the question on culture is a long-term battle. And it's one that you have to be dogged, you have to have determination and resilience. You will have setbacks. But at the end of the day, I know that I can't solve everything for everyone. I can barely solve things for my team, for myself sometimes, right? And so you just have to pick your battle and know that you're not in this alone. Mm-hmm. And for the people that are out fighting for language, please continue to do what you do. Like the path that you're on, studying anthropology, I look forward to what you'll do to add more support to the things that we need to get done. When I talk about infrastructure, it's not one path. It's an ecosystem. It's a web of supports. It's a web of believers. It's a web of doers. And so within my realm and where my focus is, I could fight that battle, but I think it'll be detrimental to the great work that we've already started with the institutions who are fighting to change how they operate. Mm-hmm. And that has less to do with the word choice and more to do with the beliefs, the mindsets, the policies, and the approaches that they're taking. And so that's just the battle I've decided to fight. But that does not mean word choice doesn't matter. I fundamentally believe it does. I am a huge editor of everything that my team writes. But it's just a battle that's not for us right now, part one. And then the second thing I'll say, and I'll be quick, is you also got to know what unintended consequences you have. I represent a set of very vulnerable institutions. If I went out screaming, why can't I say, it just puts a crosshairs on their back. And so I also have to be a protector of those who are vulnerable. And I have to decide whether or not the actions that I'm taking today will have unintended consequences for those I really want to serve. And if I fought that battle from our position at UNCF, it's not a battle that's worth fighting. Partially because, fortunately or unfortunately, the current administration has been quite nice to HBCUs. So you just gotta take in the full context and decide what your battle is and go for it. And unfortunately, that's just not mine.
Do we want to see if there's another question?
No, I thought we have more time. I thought we could
Okay.
save up another.
Okay. So I'm going to add another piece to that too, because one of the things I know we didn't share our bios out loud, but I serve what's known as the Inland Empire, which is San Bernardino, Riverside County, two of the largest counties in the United States, and we span over 28,000 square miles. And within those 28,000 square miles, we have a large population of undocumented students, as probably many of you in this room, right, that are also facing. And I get you, I hear you. Although I personally was an undocumented student, I was a first-generation immigrant student from Cuba. I was very blessed. My family was able to come here legally and give me this opportunity to be here today. However, I know a lot of people in those scenarios, and I'm going to be very transparent. I had to take a couple mental wellness days because I worked very hard to support those students amongst all the students, and all of a sudden, it was like I felt like I was cheating on them. I couldn't talk about them. We had just done this huge story about a partnership with the Mexican consulate who allowed us to expand scholarships to students, and we couldn't even put that video up, and these stories were just amazing. And so I felt like these students finally got to a place where they felt they could say, I'm an undocumented student, and not be in fear. And then all of a sudden, post January 20th, that was no longer the case. And I even said, well, where do we stand on this? But to Ed's point, at the end of the day, is that partnership with the Mexican consulate's not going away. We just got a small award again. And these are actually the government of Mexico giving us money to award Mexican students here in the U.S., irrelevant to their documentation status, right? That's going to still continue, right? And that's going to be 5, 10, whatever number of students that we can impact. We're going to do it. And so we may not, put their stories out there. We may not publicly address certain things for also protecting them first and foremost. To Ed's point, our students come first, but our work is going to continue, right? Because they are part of that access to all, and they deserve to have access. And some of their stories are not within their control, right? They were just here because they were brought here, and they still have access, should have access to thrive. But I get you, and I just wanted to acknowledge that because I felt that, and I had to just kind of take a moment to breathe and say, how do we move forward? How do we continue focusing on what matters? And that they know that. And we need to be vocal to them in the why we're shifting. I think that's kind of uncomfortable sometimes. But when I sit with the student and say, look, I can't put your story out there. This is why. First and foremost, I'm protecting you because you were very open and courageous, and I want to admire that. But I want to protect you. And then they get it. And communication is critical. I always say communication is the glue of all things. Good or bad, if you're talking about it, communicating about it, it's going to move forward. But if we shunt that, then students are going to be like, well, where are y'all now?
Right.
So it's okay to tell students the why and what purpose we continue to move forward with.
And I'm just going to chime in really quickly because I agree with what Ed and Ida both said. And for what Ed is saying, it has taken me a moment to get to that place because I believe that words, I tell my children all the time, words matter. And I was a diversity educator for 7 years. And so it's very difficult for me to sometimes not use the language, not have this, like, you know, I think that if I was in a different era, I would have been Harriet Tubman. I'd be well. And so it's very
Come on,
difficult.
Ida.
I know, you know, it's very difficult for me not to be militant and think about and do that. But then I recognize, to Ed's point, what do I lose if I am vocal all the time? So what I have also done is I have increased my social justice activity in my personal space. And so I am more active in my community. I am more active in my social organizations around committees and different activities that can advance this work without having to be the person whose name is there and who's doing it. And so that has given me some peace as it relates, not always, but given me some peace in the process. And then also when Ida's talking about having a tough conversation, that's courageous leadership. And, you know, and I think that the other part of it is I am very hopeful that we will ride this like we have in the past, and that those stories will be able to be told. And so I think it's also communicating to students and faculty and staff that they're not lost. So everything you gave up to be able to share your story, to participate in this initiative, we're just putting it on the shelf for a minute. And then when the time is right and we can safely put it out there, we're going to elevate this again. And I think that people respect that as long as we're giving them something to look forward to and we live by our commitment. So if we say we're gonna do it, we can't be scared when we get, you know, the clouds break. We have to follow through, and we can't forget that we have made this commitment. Yes, we have someone. Oh. You're next. You're next. Yeah.
Sorry. Leonard Taylor, Director of National Service Student Engagement. Thank you all for your comments and just the thoughts and insights here. I want to ask a question about time.
Ooh.
So one of the challenges, and I think one of the trappings of the moment that we're in right now, is that we tend to think about it in a static state, like what's happening right now. There were a couple references here about what's happened in the past that I think is really important for us to consider. I want to know how you all are thinking about the future.
Yes.
Right. So what are the ways that what are the ways that you're even thinking about it, maybe from your perspective, based on your organization, or just in general as a person in the world, about how to not get consumed with the current moment and anticipate the future moments that we need to be navigating to move education forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way we're doing at Complete College America is much to the way Ed started this conversation around systems and structure, and really helping people to think about what are the barriers that are inherent, baked into our systems, our policies, our processes that facilitate, either intentionally or not, this inequity that exists. And helping to really look at the root cause of some of the results that we have, and working with institutions and professionals, faculty, on how do we address those things and create solid infrastructures that will allow us to come out stronger on the other end. Because if we can eliminate barriers or figure out a way to firm up those foundations, that no matter what the tide is, that institutions will be able to last. I think the other thing that we have to do is really focus on capacity building for our people. Mm-hmm. So with our faculty, our staff, our students, and not just the people with big titles and lots of credentials and letters behind their names. We need to invest in everyone on the campus. I was on one campus where our motto was, student success is everybody's business. I don't care if you're landscape maintenance, or you are in the residence hall, or you're the president of the institution. Everybody plays a role, because you don't know who it is who's meeting that student and creating that sense of belonging, and they can see themselves, whether it's their grandfather cutting the grass or whatever it is. So how are we investing in our people so that they become resilient, so that they can identify these things as they exist, and they are positioned to be able to help us to move forward? It can't be 5 people in the cabinet. It has to be a community endeavor.
I'm gonna try and just build, because I know we can all, I think the future needs to definitely have radical flexibility in our systems. And I think I shared this with our network. I said, it feels like this is another pandemic we're going through. And so if I look back in, the COVID times, and then, the social pandemic we lived through after that, what were the lessons learned, and how do we utilize those to actually strengthen the work we do, who we are as humans first and foremost, taking care of ourselves so we can give the best version of us everywhere we're at. And I think, and the reason I pick radical flexibility is because we cannot allow these components that are happening to break education, but we have to be able to build systems that bend, right, and respond, but also are proactive and intentional, right? So thinking of, how do we incorporate everyone, right? You talk sometimes to faculty and they're like, well, what do I have to do with equity? Or IR, well, I just give numbers, right? But no, we need to be able to allow them to understand the impact they make in the story, and building not only as, student serving institutions, but institutions that no matter where the students they're at, they are viewed as a whole person, all components of the student, right? And so I think if we humanize, right, our approach and the way we do the work in our systems and build systems breaking these barriers down, I have to believe, right, that we will be able to move forward and look back. And I hope to build, I know we all hope to build a better future for those students and our own kids, right, and family members. And so I have to believe that, justice will be the work of tradition, right? And we love our traditions. I know I have a lot of family traditions, and so I try to see my work as what traditions am I leaving behind for others to build on. It's my work my way to humanize the grind of every day. But if I'm going to add a negative wisdom, it'll be radical flexibility, and we have to figure out the ways to build that by default, so that we can't break, but instead we're able to bend as needed.
Yeah. I appreciate this question so much and agree with my colleagues as well. And would just say, time for me is both a pressure and a privilege. In the HBCU community, we talk about how we're our ancestors' wildest dreams. And our wildest dreams have yet to come, which is amazing. And when you think about what things we're doing today for a future that we might never see, I actually take solace in the struggle. If I think about what Harriet Tubman over there imagined the world might be, to think about the progress we've made in that short period of time is amazing. But it's true, we're fighting sort of delayed justice, systemic inertia, eroding public trust. In many ways, we might be on borrowed time right now, but the work of the future still lies ahead. So while I imagine a future that will come, I don't sort of dwell on it. I do the work of today, and I hope that whoever picks up the baton when it's my turn to put it down continues the hard work, and that's what gets me excited. That I look forward to the day where generations after me look back on this work and they say that was pivotal for this reason, and that continued the struggle. So for me, time is important. Time is a luxury, but time is also an opportunity.
This gentleman.
Hello. So I'm Terrence. I'm a data analytics and data science student at Fresno State, and I was really interested when you were talking about using data to kind of push policy in a way. And I'm just kind of wanted to ask a couple questions about how with a reduction in government data sets when it comes to minority groups, how do you see that impacting your guys' your fields and your research and your and I guess education as a wider thing?
I'll go quickly and I'll say do for yourself. Like we have to do for ourselves. Like if you believe that a compliant data system is the only data system you have to improve your outcomes, you're in trouble. So build your own data system. You should have your own institutional data system first. And once you get your own institutional data system, then you need to build a coalition who are like institutions, like-minded, focused in the same direction, build partnerships, because partnerships will allow you to benchmark and understand how your data is trending versus some norm. And so for me, while I appreciate iPads thoroughly, it's my favorite data set in the world. So if we can do whatever we can to keep it, please do. But at the end of the day, we can't depend on that, partially because it's insufficient. So for me, when I think about the eroding data systems, public data systems, okay, institutions, what data systems are you building because you have all the data for your students yourself? And what partnerships are you building with other institutions that have like data? Build your own system.
And I'll add, and teach more than the data people how to use them.
Boom, that part.
And so build institutional data capacity so that you have more people understanding the right question to ask at the right time of the right people. And so you can collect different types of information. But right now we rely on institutions, we rely on one office to give us all the information when we're all collecting data all the time. But how are people being trained on to identify that is something that should be captured and then shared. So that's what I would add to what Ed said. And we have just a minute or so left, and so we're at the end of our conversation. And just a couple of things to kind of wrap us up. One is, first of all, thank you all for being here and for participating in this conversation with us. We have a few takeaways, I think. And those are around the fact that, identify what the battle is that we're fighting and who we're fighting for. And really use that to center the work that we're doing. We need to build coalitions and start a movement. Right? I think we have a few movements happening. So if you don't want to start your own, join somebody else's. And because it is our collective social action, our collective working together, sharing of ideas, sharing of energy, sharing of courage that really is going to move us. Think about the systems that are the foundations of the work that we're doing and interrogate them. And interrogate the people. Now this is scandalous. Interrogate the people who are creating these systems, right? Because if I have a program and I think it's important, then I want you to ask me good questions about that. And be ready to do that and stand up for those things. That's right. And that you're not in this by yourself. The noise out there is a distraction to make us believe that we are isolated, but we represent communities. And when we were thinking about this panel, one of the things that was really important is that the communities that we represent, we have this idea about working together, taking care of each other. That's the root of who we are as people, as all my communities, right? Like all my little subsets. And so find your people. Find your people and remember that there are lots of people who are committed to this work and in the fight and doing this, and then create a movement. So don't give up, because we have lots of hope, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and
that's right.
And because our students need us to be hopeful, and they need us to be out there in the front, strong and doing the good work. So thank y'all and continue to do the good work.